Back at it. Vacation's over. Back to work. Work. Using my finger quotes, work, if you call this
Such
work.
as it is.
Such as it is. 85 days to the presidential election. People say that as if that's a short amount of time. That's a long freaking time. Really could learn everything you need to learn in 8 days.
If you were serious about it, less than that, sure.
Glad you've joined us. Boy, I'm already missing my kids. I had so much fun with Sam over vacation.
It's
getting to hang out all day, every day, and get in the habit of seeing him every morning. Henry, not as much. I enjoy spending. He doesn't talk, and so he's the strong, silent type. But Sam and I had a good time. I realized last night at the end of our week, though, talking to my wife, we spent exactly 0 minutes talking to each other in a week's of vacation.
Wow.
Other than, the daily duties of running life.
Conferring on the logistics.
Yeah. There was no us alone at all in an entire week, which we've got to try to find a way to fix. But unbelievable.
Well, yeah. These are the challenges. Here's one of the challenges for Merck. A brief reference to the election, then pivoting off it, so don't freak out. Number one. Paul Ryan being portrayed as an extremist of some lunatic sort because he believes in returning to the budgets of like a year and a half ago. We've gone so far down certain roads in this country, you look like an extremist just wanting to remind people of how it's kind of supposed to work. For instance, this new brilliant eminent domain idea that Sacramento, Elk Grove, San Bernardino officials are considering, in which they are going to snatch up the mortgages held by private investors in the name of eminent domain for the purpose of then paying them off or something or other. Tim Sandiford, Tim the lawyer from the Pacific Legal Foundation, joins us. Tim, you familiar with this story?
Yes, I am. It originated in where I grew up in the Inland Empire, and I've been following it with a depressed look all this way.
So eminent domain is supposed to be, look, we got to build an interstate highway. We got to put it somewhere. Here's $5 million for your farm. We're going to run it through it. Go buy another farm. I think everybody agrees there's at least some legitimacy to that existing.
That's why the Constitution says that government can take private property through eminent domain for public use. And that's all. It can't take private property for private use, to take property from one person and transfer it to another. Of course, unfortunately, under modern Supreme Court decisions, that's basically all government does nowadays, and they get away with it every time.
So what are they talking about doing specifically?
Well, what they're going to do is condemn mortgages on property that is currently appraised at less than the sale price.
Which is all of them.
That's right. Well, for example, my house. I own a house in a small community called Rescue, which is not far from Placerville, California, and my house is underwater right now. But what's important about this plan is that this plan does not involve defaulting mortgages. What they're doing is condemning performing mortgages on property that's underwater. For example, my house. And that's important because this is being talked about as if it's some sort of plan for aiding the poor. It is not a plan for aiding the poor. It's a plan for revaluing performing mortgages from middle-class folks like me who are doing just fine. It's just that their homes happen to be worth less than they paid for.
So the government is going to condemn a mortgage, which is a bit of a head-scratcher on its face, and take the mortgage and give it to a different company.
Exactly. They're not taking the house, they're taking the mortgage, and they can do that under California constitutional law. There was a very famous case in the early 80s in which the city of Oakland condemned the Oakland Raiders football team in order to keep them from moving to Los Angeles.
Because they sucked?
And a lot of people, when I tell them the story, they always say, well, talk about blighted property. But in any case, the California Supreme Court said that was perfectly okay because the contract is itself private property. So what they're condemning is not the house, they're condemning the mortgage, and they can get away with that. And then they're going to transfer that mortgage in such a way that benefits private parties. And again, unfortunately, under existing law, there's practically nothing, I think, that can be done to stop this.
But what happens to you? So you use your example. So if they did this to you, what would happen? I mean, do you still get to live there, or what would happen?
Yes. That's right, and all they would be basically doing on my end is they would be eliminating some of my liability. It would be benefiting me,
right?
And the people who pay the cost are the mortgage holders. And who are the mortgage holders? Well, if you ask most liberal elected assemblymen and elected senators and elected city officials, which is to say in California virtually any elected official, what they will tell you is that mortgages are owned by greedy bankers with big dollar signs on their chest.
Right.
Smoke big cigars and wear tall top hats.
And we hate them.
In fact, mortgages are owned by retirees and people who are seeking to retire who have retirement plans that consist of investments. These properties secure the retirement funds of existing retirees and people who are going to retire, and they're paying the cost for my mortgage under this plan. That's what's happening is they're transferring money from people on fixed incomes and giving it to people like me. That's insane.
So I'm Joe's Mortgage, and I lent money to various people to buy houses, including you, Tim. And I noticed Tim's underwater, but by God, he's still paying his payment, and I hope he keeps it up because, I'm on a razor-thin margin here. And then the government steps in and says, we're condemning your mortgage. And once I look up that precedent and even contemplate what that means, what happens to me then as the mortgage holder?
Well, you get paid compensation, but you get paid compensation at the current value, not at the expected value. And the reason that's important is because what the government's going to do is they're going to say, oh, these mortgages, they're worth nothing because the property is underwater. When, of course, they are worth something because I'm making my mortgage payments. I'm going to keep making my mortgage payments.
Most people are.
Right.
What's that?
Most people are.
Yeah, exactly right.
Until it turns
they're
around.
Assuming the worst. Wow, and oh my God!
In order to get the property for cheaper, so the Constitution requires just compensation, and the problem with this plan is it's not just compensation because it doesn't take into account the fact that these are performing mortgages.
Tim,
this is the absurd idea to begin with.
Tim Sandifer's online. Tim, the lawyer. I think the most proper response to this is the oft-quoted phrase that a government that's powerful enough to give you everything you want is powerful enough to take away everything you have. I mean, if we let the government do this sort of thing, they can do anything.
And the people who pay the cost are not only the retirees, but also what about people who are looking to buy homes? Consider responsible people who are smarter than I was. I bought a house at the height of the bubble because I got fooled into it by my own hopes. It's nobody's fault but mine, and I'm stuck with a house that's worth less than I paid for it. That's fine. I can deal with that. That's my responsibility. But other people were smarter than me, and they held off and they waited because they knew that eventually the price of houses would drop and then they could buy a house. And this is their opportunity. This is the moment for people who are responsible and sensible about their money. And this plan is going to take their opportunity away from them in order to reward irresponsible people like me.
Absolutely. Well, that's the system.
Right. And that's not what the Constitution was written to allow.
Every plan that anybody's come up with over the last several years regarding mortgages has been that way. And
stupid should hurt.
Well said, Tim Sandifer, Tim the lawyer. But you're thinking this is gonna go through.
I think they'll get away with it.
Oh God!
I think they'll get away with it unless you can prove that it is a gift of public funds, which is unconstitutional under the California Constitution.
Land of the free, my ass. The government can now do anything, absolutely anything they want.
Hey, I got a quick unrelated question, Tim. Where do you come down on Ayn Rand? I just asked this because Paul Ryan, in the early days of his announcement as the VP choice, he cited Ayn Rand when he was a young man as his moral guide.
I am myself an objectivist, which is I subscribe to the philosophy that Ayn Rand articulated in her books, and I strongly urge all of your listeners to read.
Is there a condensed version? Because I tried to read Atlas Shrugged one time, and it's like 19,000 pages.
Atlas Shrugged, because it was chapter 843, and he was thinking, Christ, does this ever end?
I happen to know that Jack Armstrong reads the Lyndon Johnson 15-volume biography. You can get through Atlas Shrugged. Give me a break.
Yeah, what he said.
However, Paul Ryan is in no sense a follower of Ayn Rand's ideas. The man supported the bailout. He's a huge big government conservative, and he's another example of why the Romney ticket does not deserve anybody's vote.
Oh, stop it.
Because the Republican Party is a bunch of sellouts and don't deserve our support.
Yeah, I want to hear him explain a lot of those votes, because I've seen a lot of the tweets from people like yourself, Tea Party sort of people, small government sort of people, on some of the votes that he made, and I want to see him explain why he did that.
Until the Republican Party nominates a true free market person who actually believes in small government, they will not get my vote. And if that means that the Obama administration is in there for 4 more years, so be it.
I hear you. I understand.
If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, Tim, you're asking too much. Paul Ryan got into the halls of power, and he's trying to tug things back on track, as opposed to, a radical like yourself.
He's got to explain those
tries
votes.
To shout in through the window.
Bailouts is not going on the right track. I'm sorry. The man supported the bailouts. That's the end of the story for me.
All right, Tim, well said. We always appreciate the conversation. Tim Sandifer from the Pacific Legal Foundation.